The Knicks put a lot on film against the Minnesota Timberwolves that suggests they could be one of the best teams in the NBA. The stats are backing that up.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are locked on to the New York Knicks. My name is Gavin Schall. I am a New York City native and a credentialed media member that's been covering the Knicks for nearly a decade, and this is Locked On Knicks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily podcast on the Knicks, giving you those detailed insight on your favorite team at least 5 days a week. So be sure to join thousands of other Knicks fans in subscribing both YouTube and your favorite podcast platform for the best insight on your favorite team. We are rapidly approaching 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. I would love if we could get there by the start of 2026. We know there's a substantial amount of you watching every day that are not subscribed. I'd really appreciate it if you did. It is the single best way you can help us grow the show. And today's episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. I kind of wanted to use this episode to put an exclamation point on that win over the Minnesota Timberwolves, because it was, I said as much on the pod with XJ. I think it's the first time this season the Knicks look like how Mike Brown envisions that they look, and we're firing on all cylinders, and it looked like, frankly, a championship type team. And we've seen stretches like that over the past 2 years, right? We all talk about January 2024 when they went 15-1, if I'm remembering correctly, and had like a plus 16 net rating. Last season, we never saw sustained stretches of dominant play like that, but there were specific games. The first game last year against the Minnesota Timberwolves, frankly, like both matchups they had with the Denver Nuggets last season, the first half or the first three quarters against the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? There were the entire series against the, I shouldn't say the entire series, select stretches of the entire series against the Boston Celtics, right? In fits and spurts, we saw championship level basketball from this team. There are, 15 teams in the NBA that play championship basketball for a single night every season. There are 6 every year, approximately 8 maybe, that sustain that over 5 games. There's 3 teams that sustain that for a month. There's obviously only 1 team that wins a championship. Maybe there's 2 or 3 in any given year that are deserving to win a championship. It could reasonably have won a title in another year. I'm fascinated to see which of those groups this Knicks team ultimately falls into. We know they're in the top half of the league. We think they're one of the top 5 teams in the league. They're going to have to bring what they brought against the Timberwolves on a consistent basis, and for 48 minutes. And that was Mike Brown's big emphasis coming into the game. He said, I don't think we played a complete game yet. And they weren't perfect against the Timberwolves, right? Things really, really died for them at times in the second quarter of that game. And yet they gave you, 24 minutes of great basketball. Like if they can do that on a nightly basis, they are going to win the vast majority of their games. And there's a lot statistically backing that up. But where I want to start off on this team potentially being dominant is their schedule. According to Tankathon.com, the Knicks have the second easiest remaining strength of schedule in the NBA. That is just determined by their opponent's win percentage. They just don't have a lot of brutal competition on the schedule, and that's mostly because the Eastern Conference is so weak, and the bulk of their hard games against the West almost all come after the All-Star break. I believe both their games against Oklahoma City are after the All-Star break. They play the Rockets both times after the All-Star break. I think the Nuggets they see once before, once after. I believe both games against the Lakers, certainly nothing before January. Like, you go through the next 18 games for this team, like basically taking you through the end of December. The only games I think the Knicks could excusably lose, they will inevitably lose a couple of the ones that they have no business losing, but the ones they could excusably lose, they play Miami 3 times. Miami's just 4-4, but net rating indicates they've been just an excellent team so far this season. They play Orlando twice, they play Philly once, and they play the Bucks once. That is 7 out of 18 games they could lose. And in those games, frankly, you should beat the Heat 2 out of 3 times. You should probably beat Orlando the way they're playing right now, and both those games come in the next 2 weeks. You should probably beat Orlando twice, but you could maybe go 1-1 in those games. You should probably beat Philly. Philly's good, but so much of it is driven by Tyrese Maxey seemingly emerging as a top 10 player in the NBA. The Knicks have played that. They've countered that before. They played Philly really well over the last few years. You should be able to get a revenge win over the Milwaukee Bucks after they beat you, right? The Knicks should go, I don't know, that's like pessimistically 4-3 in those games and 9-2, 10-1 in those other games. Maybe more realistically 8-3. The point is, like, the Knicks should be the 1 or the 2 seed when you finish that stretch in the Eastern Conference. Anything short of that is a disappointment. And there are a lot of indicators saying that they are getting ready to approach that level of play. The Knicks are 5th in the NBA in net rating. I think that's just like the regular net rating stat on cleaning the glass, which removes garbage time. I think Miami jumps them. They're 6th. But there's still a pretty substantial gulf between them and the teams ahead of them. They are 1.5 points worse than the San Antonio Spurs, who are in 4th. They're 4.7 points worse than the Denver Nuggets, who are in 3rd. They're like almost 7 points worse, I believe, than the Houston Rockets, who are in 1st. So the Knicks are an elite team, but they are like stratospheres away from being the best team in the NBA right now. But I think there's a lot of reason to think that they could get there, as we'll get into. They're currently 4th in offensive rating, scoring 119.3 points per 100 possessions. That is like a legitimately elite ranking, like where the net rating is maybe a little bit deceptive because of those gaps. They are just a little over a point away from being second. The Rockets just have gotten off to a ridiculous start to the year on the offensive end, and they've been buoyed by after like a tough first 2 games by quite a weak schedule after that. So we'll see if that starts to go down for them. But Knicks 4th in offensive rating, and that is despite not really shooting the ball well so far this year. They are 19th in the NBA in effective field goal percentage. We talked about it, but they have 2 All-NBA players. They have 2 players I would say are in the top 12. Some would say 8. Some conservatively would say 15 offensive players on planet Earth, and Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns. And neither one of them has shot the ball well so far this year. If that changes, the Knicks could all of a sudden see that stat take a pretty substantial leap. Like Jalen Brunson this season is shooting 46% from the field, just 33% from 3. Karl-Anthony Towns, even worse, 41% from the field, 34% from 3. They've been buoyed by OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges, probably shooting a little bit ahead of their skis. OG 49, 41, 76 splits this year, 41% from 3. OG taking 7 a game is absurd. He's never shot that well on that volume in his career. Mikal Bridges even better, 52% or 53% from the field, 46.5% from 3, 87.5% from the foul line. Jonathan Macri had in his newsletter today, shooting 65% from the corners on threes. Like that is absurd for Mikal Bridges. Point being, those 2 might shoot a little worse, but the guys taking the majority of your shots in Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns are going to shoot substantially better, particularly Cat, as the season goes along. Brunson, I think, has a little bit of room for improvement. So you would expect that offensive rating to go up, because I think some of the other things they're doing in terms of their pace, in terms of their shot diet, and in terms of their dominant offensive rebounding are sustainable. The Knicks are 13th in defensive rating. They've allowed 113.8 points per 100 possessions. That is over a point worse than the Celtics, who are in 12th. So there is a pretty substantial meridian there. But as we're going to get into, much like with the offense, there are some underlying indicators that the Knicks are undershooting their level of play defensively, and maybe even more importantly, their second best, arguably even their best defensive player on a permanent basis, Mitchell Robinson, has barely played so far this season, and that is going to help the Knicks get a lot better on that end of the floor. But we're going to talk about that in just a sec. We're going to get into some more of the stats that I think indicate the Knicks are a great team hiding in plain sight in just a sec right here on Locked On Knicks. But first, I want to tell you about our good friends over at DoorDash. DoorDash has an incredible new deal, and the NBA season is heating up, and DoorDash has found the perfect way to keep fans in their bag all season long. Whether you're watching for the highlights of your fantasy team or just your favorite player, DoorDash makes every game night even better. DoorDash is the official on-demand delivery platform of the NBA, and they're celebrating with something called the bag drop. Every time an NBA player scores 50 points in a game, DoorDash drops 50% off your order with Dash Pass the next day. You're automatically entered for a chance to win the ultimate fan bag. We're talking about player-inspired drip, exclusive gear, and stuff you'll actually want. I love that it's not just food. You can get everything from snacks to drinks, headphones, ice, even socks, all delivered. I need some new socks. So next time somebody goes for 50, use promo code NBA50 the next day to get 50% off on DoorDash with Dash Pass, plus your shot at the bag drop. Dash Pass members only. 50% off up to $10 the day after a 50-point game with promo code. Terms apply. No purchase necessary. Ends April 13th. Open to U.S. residents 21 or older. Visit DoorDashinYourBag.com for full details. DoorDash in your bag all season long. All right, what's up, guys? We are back here on Locked On Knicks. I'm Gavin Schall. You can also check me out on Saturdays hosting Locked On NBA. I filled in last night, and we talked about the Phoenix Suns. The game I was at. The Suns, sneakily good. The Clippers, not so sneakily. Very, very bad. But that is not a topic for today. I wanted to talk about some of the underlying metrics that indicate the Knicks are actually even better than that 5th in net rating, 4th in offensive rating, 13th in defensive rating they've been so far this season. First one, the Knicks are tied for first in the NBA in threes made per game, hitting 16.4 so far. The volume has been outstanding. The efficiency, the shooting on a game-to-game basis has been a little bit up and down. But overall, the Knicks shooting 37.5% from three. Can't really complain about that. Again, the volume has been outstanding. They're taking 43.5 a game. I think that is right around the right number for them. Maybe when this offense really gets clicking, it'll even go up a little bit more. But they're in a pretty good place, taking that many threes per game. First in the NBA makes. After last season, what were they? They were hovering around 27th, like for the majority of the second half of last year, despite their personnel being a lot better than that. Have pretty much the exact same team. Like Jordan Clarkson and Gershon Yabusele have not contributed significantly to that three-point shooting so far. Clarkson's hitting 1.4 a game. Gershon's hitting 0.4 a game. Obviously, it doesn't hurt, but it hasn't changed it. The biggest difference has been Mikal and OG combining to make 5.5 a game and shifting their shot selection a little bit. And that's something that David Würzberger, a guy who once upon a time I replaced it, hosting Locked On Nets, like me, is a Knicks fan, which is fun. Shout out to the Locked On Nets days. I'm just going to read you a quote from him from his tweet. Bridges cut out his middies for some threes, for more playmaking. He slips in the paint easier. He's a better passer and still isn't great at above the break from three, but is taking them. Anunoby's cut out his triple threat and midi stuff for more threes. Less creating, but still gets transition post-ups and tons of shots from deep and cuts. I think that is a well-stated way to just talk about how those two players, I mean, I mentioned before, they've both been hyper efficient to start this year, but it is also just like Mike Brown is optimizing their shot diet in a really crucial way. Mikal Bridges' rim volume, I think, could still serve to get even higher. I think it is actually even a little bit higher than cleaning the glass indicates, just because his free throws are up. So I would say his true rim attempts are most likely quite a bit higher, but his shots at the rim are up 22% to 24% a year ago. His mid-range volume is pretty substantially down. It was 41% of his shot diet last year. That was 95th percentile for a wing in the NBA. This season, it's 31% of his shots, which is 76th percentile. And even for someone as elite as Mikal Bridges is in the mid-range, that is more so what you want, because even when he's shooting 50%, 52% from mid-range, which is like a special shot maker there, he's still going to be more efficient at the basket. He's still going to be more efficient shooting threes. And this season, 45% of his shots are coming from three-point range. That is only 42nd percentile, but I'm okay with that because he's so good in the mid-range, because you want him taking more at the rim. Obviously, like if he continues to shoot the ball the way he has in the early season or anything close to it, where I'll say it again, he's 46.5% from three. If he's even a 42% three-point shooter, ideally he'd be taking 10 a game. Like you'd love for him to get that up. The Knicks just have so many different options that might not be realistic for him, and that is ultimately okay. Like I am really, really happy with Mikal's shot diet so far. And in turn, this is from DJ Zulo of Knicks Film School, the Knicks shot diet as a team has gotten a whole lot healthier. Last season, 30% of their shots came from mid-range. That was 16th in the NBA. 35% of their shots came from three. That was 27th in the NBA. This season, just 23% of their shots from mid-range. That is 28th in the league, and that is despite the fact that they have two mid-range killers in Jalen Brunson, in Mikal Bridges, and Mike Brown is encouraging those two guys to just take like the highest end of those shots, right? Like let the cream rise to the top and then don't have the rest of the drink. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's the analogy I'm going with. And in turn, their 3-point volume in terms of a percentage of their shot diet is up substantially. 44% of their shots are coming from 3-point range. That is fourth in the NBA. Again, shout out to DJ Zulo for those numbers. Also, this is from Cleaning the Glass. The Knicks are fifth in offensive rebounding percentage. That is something that is really buoying their offense in a big way. When they're not shooting the ball that well, they're getting a ton of second chances. I believe they're seventh in the NBA in second chance points. And the offensive rebounding is by committee. It obviously starts with Mitchell Robinson. When he's on the floor, it all just becomes substantially easier for the New York Knicks. He's averaging 6.3 offensive rebounds per game in his 3 games so far this season. That is first in the NBA, and that is comparing him to guys who are playing 32, 33, 34, 35, 36 minutes per game. Mitchell Robinson is beating them out, playing less than half of that. He's playing 16 minutes a game. He is someone, I think, outside of New York who is not discussed as being one of the most physically dominant players in the NBA. I don't know any other way you could describe him. And I'll shout out DJ again. Like he did a video on or showed a clip on like just the early work Mitch puts in and how he basically becomes a defensive rebounder on the offensive end of the floor with his ability to just beat his player to a spot, even if that means he's starting off out of bounds, and just wedge him away from the rim, which he ragdolls some of the biggest, strongest men on planet Earth. Like he is a freak of nature. This very likely could be his last year on the Knicks. And like if he plays like this and he doesn't suffer some kind of significant injury, which obviously we're all hoping he doesn't, I don't know any way that the Knicks are going to be able to afford him unless maybe they move on from Josh Hart this offseason. But that is going to be a tricky decision. And it is another reason why I and so many others keep highlighting this year is the year for the Knicks to go win a championship, right? Like this is the reality of the second apron. We saw the Celtics have to break up their team. We saw the Pacers decide to move on from Miles Turner. Like when you have the year where everything comes together in terms of being able to afford the peak version of your roster, you have to take advantage of it. Mitch is such a game changer for this team. But I do think it's important to note that it is not just Mitchell Robinson. This is from James Edwards' athletic piece today on the Knicks rebounding. The Knicks have 4 non-big men, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, and Deuce McBride, who've all played at least 5 games and averaged at least 20 minutes and more than 1 offensive rebound per game. The Indiana Pacers, who are second in the NBA in offensive rebounds per game, are the only other team that can say the same thing. And I think the Minnesota game, where the Knicks got 21 boards, epitomized that. Mike Brown, in his postgame, talked a lot about crashing from the corners and when and where guys are supposed to crash, and how he generally is from the Tom Thibodeau school of being very like opportunistic about that and is willing to sacrifice a little bit in terms of getting back on defense. Though I will say in the early going of the season, unlike last year's Knicks, they have not had a ton of issues in terms of tracking back defensively and playing transition defense and finding their matchups. And if you can strike that balance, that is everything you want as an NBA team, to be able to crash and still be able to recover to play transition defense. But there's just a ferocity. There's a level of intent. There was a level of engagement. I would wager, I'd go back to our buddy Benji Ritholtz's inertia theory on Julius Randle. Like when everyone's involved in the offense, when everyone is moving on and off the ball constantly, when Mikal's getting his touches, when Josh is getting his touches, when OG is getting opportunities to shoot the ball with abandon, you see those guys in turn hustle a little bit more and be a little bit more physical. But then you see Deuce McBride diving on the floor for loose balls. You see Jalen Brunson in that Wolves game. Like I'll mention it later because I want to give you some final notes from that one that I didn't get to with XJ the other day. He's crashing with legitimate aggression. More so on the defensive end, but even on the offensive end, you saw possessions against the Wolves where he like bullied guys out of the way and got put back dunks, got put back layups. Like it is a full team effort, and the Knicks have the size, they have the physicality, especially when that starting lineup is on the floor. But even with their bench, even with their smaller guards, to compete and fight and scratch and claw for offensive rebounds. And they are continuing, even in the post-Tom Thibodeau era, to make an identity out of that. And that is really, really exciting. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the defensive statistical indicators that do lead me to believe that this Knicks team can be great this season, or at least very good on that end of the floor. And then just some final thoughts on Knicks Wolves. We'll get into that next right here on Locked On Knicks. But first, I want to tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel's live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. I saw it against my team, the Denver Broncos, when the Giants were up 26-8. They blew it. If you had put some money down on the Broncos when they were down by 26-8, and that was a 0 in 1,600 scenario in terms of comebacks historically, I don't know. You maybe could have paid for your kid to go to college. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And we also want to tell you about our good friends over at PrizePicks. We all like to be right. And this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both. There's no better place to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least two player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. I've been using PrizePicks during both Football Sunday and NBA tip-offs because it just keeps every single game exciting. I like picking my favorite players, whether that be Jackson Dart or Jalen Brunson, to see how my predictions pan out. And the new Stacks feature is a game changer. I could pick an over on Jalen Brunson's points, threes, and assists in the same lineup. My favorite part, the injury reboot. If one of your players leaves with an injury, it saves your lineup for a loss. So download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. It's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. The Knicks have been really, really good I'm exaggerating. The Knicks have been solid, above average on the defensive end of the floor to start this year. XJ mentioned it the other day, but opponents have shot fantastically against the New York Knicks. 58%, I shouldn't round on this, 57.7 effective field goal percentage. That is the second worst mark in the NBA. So you can look at that one of two ways. Either the Knicks play terrible defense or teams are scalding hot. And it seems generally that teams have been scalding hot. And the Knicks have allowed a bad diet of shots. So that conjunction is going to result in you allowing one of the higher effective field goal percentages in the NBA. And yet the Knicks are still above average on defense. How's that possible? Well, they're one of the best defensive rebounding teams in the NBA. They're fifth in the NBA they're first in defensive rebounding percentage in the NBA. That is Karl-Anthony Towns. That is Mitch when he's played. It's the whole team boxing out and crashing. That's OG really stepping up on that end of the floor. That's encouraging. They're 16th in forced turnovers, not as high as you'd want them. I think before the season, we were predicting something like 12th there and potential to approach the top 8. We'll see where that goes. It's so much of it is on Mikal and OG. If other guys get involved there, I think the more you see Mitchell Robinson, the more that number will go up. And even more than that, they're not allowing a ton of free throws. 5th in opponent free throw rate so far this season. The Knicks can certainly get better on that end of the floor. Teams will cool down. The schedule has not been brutal, but it will only get easier thanks to the Eastern Conference. And maybe the Knicks will start playing Deuce McBride a little bit more. Not that he's been great for their defense, but he's good for the team in general. This is my final note in terms of the Knicks being elite. The Knicks are scoring 12.5 more points per 100 possessions when he's on the floor. He's a plus 9.5 net rating from our buddy Jeff over at the Hot Hand Theory. Go check them out. The Knicks have a plus 13.4 net rating with him and Jalen Brunson on the floor together. I've said it all offseason. I made the argument, continue to make the argument. Play Deuce McBride, trust Deuce McBride, trust him and Jalen Brunson as a duo. They are really small. They will have some issues on defense. Those will be mitigated by you having close to the best offense of any lineup in the NBA when those two are on the floor together. All right, let's get into some quick final thoughts from Knicks Wolves. Thought it was a good game for Jalen Brunson in this one. We did not talk about him, and it's rare where we have a game recap where we don't talk about him, but that just tells you how good the Josh Harts, the Mitchell Robinsons, the Deuce McBrides, the OG Anunobys of the world were in that game. Brunson got off to a pretty rough start against Minnesota, and he seems to, like we said it in the preseason when they played, I think Anthony Edwards guards him as well or better than any player in the NBA. And he frustrated, I think the Timberwolves defense as a whole was really locked in and frustrated Jalen Brunson early in this game. He had a midi that went in and out. He hip checked Devo Dante into the bench on a screen out of bounds, which erased an OG Anunoby 3 off the board. That was a bummer. Then he threw it away to Edwards on what was just like a lazy kick out. And the Knicks were really struggling early. Tried to ISO Julius Randle and got swatted. That felt like a low point, though it was fun to see. I liked seeing that. And then he got going. Off a missed 3. Cat got a rebound, outlet to Jalen, 70-foot lob to Mikal Bridges for a layup. And I've said this anecdote before on this podcast, but when I went to college at Arizona State, did a lot of play-by-play broadcasting in my senior year. I got lucky enough to go on the road and cover the UCLA Bruins and then go on the road to Las Vegas and broadcast the Pac-12 tournament. And I saw a lot of Lonzo Ball, and there's no one in my life. I'm too young for Magic Johnson, unfortunately. Little too young to remember prime Jason Kidd, but no one in like my recent NBA loving history like that is as conscientious about seeking out those up the court opportunities as Lonzo Ball and consistently throwing those passes. What we're seeing from Jalen Brunson this year approaches that. It is an emphasis of Mike Brown's, and it is one that Jalen has completely embraced. Then to start the second half, like we just see more of it from Jalen. Like when the Knicks were trailing by 4, had to get going right after halftime. Jalen Brunson hits Mikal up the court for a 3. And then OG Anunoby runs the floor and seals Dante, and Jalen pushes pace, hits him for a layup. And then Jalen Brunson hit ahead to Mikal. He hits Karl-Anthony Towns, trailing for a 27-footer. Him setting the tone on pace, him being unselfish, him having shorter touches. Chris Herring had the stat last year that Jalen Brunson's average length of touch was the highest in the NBA last season. Jalen will still have some of those possessions right where he gets to ISO and he gets to dribble a million times and he gets to cook and he gets to put a mixtape together. And those are great. And the Knicks need that to be great. Like that's what makes him special. And yet they also need the possessions where he catches the ball and he passes it without taking a dribble. And Jalen is doing a really good job striking that balance in the early season. Again, as the shooting comes along, you are going to see, I think, the best version of Jalen Brunson we have ever gotten as Knicks fans. For Cat, a little bit similar, where it was somewhat of a mixed night, and he got off to a slow start, just like the Knicks did in general. Defensively, he had some issues early in this one where he had to guard Jaden McDaniels. And I mentioned this during the pod, but Knicks Wolves is such a fun matchup because there are just inevitable, like, there's going to be at least one defender guarding an offensive player that you are deeply uncomfortable with for both teams, just because of some of the lineups they put out there and both teams playing double big at times. And yet the Knicks not wanting Cat on Randle because Randle can just blow by him sometimes. So I don't totally hate that matchup. And Minnesota not really wanting Rudy guarding Cat. So it becomes like an interesting little chess match there. But he was guarding Jaden McDaniels. McDaniels put a 3 in his eye. Then in the pick and roll, there's a possession where he just had to get back to tag Rudy Gobert once Mikal recovered. I complimented him in the Wizards game for doing specifically that. He didn't, and then Ant just hit Rudy for a lob. So that's something that Cat just has to be consistent with. I know our buddy Shax pointed out on Twitter, like, you oftentimes just don't know what coverage Cat is playing. And based on the reporting from The Athletic last year, I'm not sure if Cat always knows what coverage Cat is playing, where he's sometimes in between a drop and being at the level, and it just leaves him in no man's land, and it's not good. When he's focused, when he's locked in, he can do it. It's just a challenge for him, like mentally. And I'm not saying in terms of like basketball IQ. I think just literally in terms, and I empathize as someone with severe ADHD, it is a real problem for him to just stay focused minute by minute, second by second of a basketball game. And it's hard. There's a lot going on. But he made up for it. I mentioned that, like, pump and go, blow by drive on Rudy Gobert. maybe my single favorite play on a night full of incredible plays outside the OG Anunoby putbacks, which were just all timers. He got Ant on him in the post. Mikal, this has been an emphasis for Mike Brown. Like if he's a mismatch, I know Cat's not a great post-up guy. Get him the ball and give him a chance. Mikal made sure he got the ball. Cat doesn't get flustered when Ant is really strong, does a good job holding his ground for a few seconds, and Cat backs him. Julie's late to help, and Cat dunks on Ant's head. Awesome moment. I mentioned some of the passing from him, but has developed really good chemistry with Deuce and Clarkson. Got them both layups in the second quarter. His defense got better as the game went along. Great help D, swatting Jaden McDaniels at one point. I mentioned that trail 27-footer. Cat passing is not even from a DHO position, but from a face-up position where he like a pump probe extra to OG for a three. His energy was there. He was cutting. He was crashing the glass. It was an encouraging performance for Cat. Mikal Bridges, relatively quiet game for him, but he had some good moments. Some of them we mentioned already, but I just wanted to shout out 3 plays from him, I'll say. Fun wrinkle on the pin and screens that Mike Brown has been running a ton of the last couple of games. OG set one for Mikal and then ghosted it and cut to the rim. Ant and Devo both launched at Mikal, who gets it to OG over the top. Rudy recovers, so OG hits Hart cutting. Hart then sprays it back out to Brunson on the right wing. Brunson extra to Mikal in the corner for a 3. That was the Knicks' first field goal of the game. And it was a really good sequence. And it starts off with Mikal making a good read and then staying shot ready and shooting it with confidence. He hit another big 3 late in the game in Rudy's eye off a Josh dribble handoff to make it 117-99. And then right after, pick Dante DiVincenzo's pocket to trigger transition and get Josh Hart a dunk. Only other person I want to shout out was Jordan Clarkson one more time. I know XJ mentioned him. I know we did a full show on the guy, but he's done some good stuff. Took a couple of bad shots in that second quarter, but the chemistry he's developing with Cat, had another one in the second half where he took a dribble handoff from Cat and got a drive and lay. Then a quarter 3 to answer one from Dante that pushed the lead up to 15 in the fourth quarter. We're seeing good stuff from him. We're seeing him allow the offense to do some of the work for him. And we talk about that with Jalen all the time. It is even more imperative for someone like Jordan Clarkson, who's a really talented scorer, but is not going to be efficient in a vacuum. He's going to be efficient because he's playing off the talents of the other guys on the floor, and he's confident enough and skilled enough to leverage those talents and leverage that gravity. That is it for today's edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast. I'm going to see, we might have one more for you guys over the weekend. If not, we will certainly be back with an episode breaking down their game against the Brooklyn Nets, which the Knicks should win, but the Nets always seem to be very competitive against them. Until then, I'm Gavin Schall. Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you soon right here on Locked On Knicks.